Welcome to the first part of this short talk on the dissolution of the monasteries. Before we start looking at the detail of this, we're going to look at the reasons behind it. So first of all, we need to check that we understand the terms that we're going to use. So, what does the term dissolution mean? Well, you may have come across this in your science. If you dissolve something, then what you do is you immerse it in something else, salt into water, and you change its state. So to dissolve is to destroy by changing its state. So the dissolution of the monasteries was about dissolving them or destroying them. The second thing we need to do, we need to check that we understand what monasteries are for. But before we even do that, we have to ask ourselves, what is a monastery? So, what is a monastery? A monastery was a place where monks lived. Normally a large building or set of buildings, normally in countryside, with farmland around it, with the farmland producing the food and the wool for clothing, things like that for the monks. So a monastery is a place where monks lived. You can also have the female version, because monasteries are never co-ed. So you could also have a convent, which is where nuns lived. But the question is, what is a monk? Well, a monk is a specialised type of priest who lives in a community rather than working in a parish. Okay, so a monk is one of these. Monks spend their time praying. That's all they do. Know what a monastery is, but the question is, what is a monastery for? Well, a monastery was seen as a type of fortress of God, and the monks were soldiers of Christ, because monasteries were to allow groups of people, usually men, to gather together to spend their time praying and doing nothing else. So it was a type of fortress of God. Monks spent their time praying rather than doing anything else. So that then begs the question, what do monks, and nuns for that matter, pray for? Think about that for a second. Well, the answer is they pray for the good of the country, the good of the people living in the country, so to protect them from evil. Remember we said fortresses of God. Medieval people saw the world as a battlefield between good and evil. And most importantly, they prayed for the souls of the dead. So they did those three things. They prayed for the good of the country, for the good of the people, and for the souls of the dead. So why did they do this? Well, to understand that, we have to understand the idea of purgatory. So what is purgatory? Where is purgatory? Because it's a spiritual, theological place. Now, we've talked about this before, haven't we? The idea of purgatory is it's a type of waiting room outside heaven, where if you haven't been bad enough to go to hell, but you're not good enough to go directly into heaven, you go into purgatory while your soul is cleaned. Because purgatory itself derives from the same word that gives us purge. And if you purge something, like the hard drive of your computer or your bodily system, what you do is you clean it so that you can start again afresh. So purgatory was where your soul was cleaned, so that you were then able to go into heaven and start a new eternal life. So it's tied in with the Catholic idea of intercession. Now, what have we said about intercession? What is intercession? Remember, we talked about the fact that when you're a lower sixth former and your Minnie gets herself into trouble with Mrs. Leach, you, as her mentor, might go and see Mrs. Leach and sort of try to make the headmistress understand that the Minnie wasn't as bad as she thought. You would intercede, you would speak up on her behalf. So purgatory is about intercession. So to go back to our question, why do they do this? They do this to intercede for the souls of the dead who are in purgatory. So the spiritual work of monasteries is therefore to do with intercession. We've talked about intercession. Do Protestants need monasteries to do this? The answer is obviously no. Why? Oops. Because Protestants don't believe in intercession. In fact, Some of them didn't believe in purgatory. For them, it was all or nothing, straight to heaven or straight to hell, because of the idea of predestination. God knows when you are first created whether you will be good or whether you will be evil. Everything is predestined, predesigned. So, if Protestants don't need monasteries, and Henry has turned England into a Protestant country by the Reformation, Henry doesn't need monasteries, and therefore he can close them down. However, there are other reasons why Henry wanted to close down the monasteries, and these other reasons were to do, as ever with Henry, to do with power, and to do with money, but there were other problems for Henry as well, because monasteries did other things apart from pray. Part 2, which I want you to look at next, will look at those other reasons, and we'll look at the other things that monasteries did.